So I guess the real question is, where is all of this stuff going? We'll talk a bit about it over the next 10 to 20 years. I'm a little bit down on the singularity. As a sci-fi writer, I love the concept. I put it into a lot of my fiction. But the truth is, I think Ray Kurzweil and a lot of people are going to have an unfortunate surprise towards the end of their lives when they're not immortal. I don't think we're actually going to get there in the near future, and that's because we'll do some predictions here. Predictions are basically a tricky business, so I'm going to be careful. But what does all this look like in the next 10 to 20 years? The fact is, we actually have no idea how to build an artificial general intelligence. Sorry, but it's just the case. We actually don't know how we do what we do. We don't know how to abstract things. What we have now are a lot of mimics of intelligence. We have a lot of narrow intelligence that gives the illusion that it is intelligent, but it's intelligent really in no way. In fact, it's kind of stupid. If we think about the history of artificial intelligence, the history is a long litany of failure, actually, for about 50 years. Sorry, guys, but it's the case. And for many years, we weren't actually able to do almost anything with artificial intelligence. It was generally a toy. If you know the history about it, we went through a series of AI winters where people just basically gave up on the technology. Jeffrey Hinton, who's now one of the godfathers of neural nets, one university kept neural net research alive with a grant. And it was basically everybody working in this space was kind of a pariah. They told you, don't study this stuff, it's never going to work. Okay? And that's because it's actually an applied science. This is something where you can't just do the work with a pen and paper like you can with physics. You actually need processing power and data and things like that. If you really think about where a lot of the breakthroughs came with deep learning in 2012, it was basically applying GPUs to something we kind of already understood. And we started to get better at some of these perceptual tasks like ImageNet to the point where we have gotten better at humans. So how do we see the future in sort of an effective way? And I think actually most people are really terrible at it. And the reason they're terrible at it is because what they do is they look at a current iteration of the technology and they project that indefinitely into the future, instead of looking at a category of technology. So a good example that I always use is home video recording is a category of technology. Betamax, VHS are iterations of technology. And so people will look at the current iteration and they go, look at all the flaws. This is terrible to look at, doesn't record very much. This is how it's always going to work. And the reason is because they're not able to then iterate through VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, Blu-ray, DVR in their mind. They can't see those things happening. The reason is because I think mostly our minds are still living in the forest. We were hunter-gatherers for 1.8 million years. Agricultural revolution has actually only been around for 12,000 years. Scientific revolution, 500. Industrial revolution, 200. Right? And when you're a hunter-gatherer, you are focused on the now at all times. Is a tiger going to eat me? Where is my next meal? Where am I sleeping? And I would argue that the vast majority of people still live within that framework. It's very difficult to see the future, right? I would say that entrepreneurs, futurists are kind of the shaman and the medicine man, right, of the global tribe, right, looking into the future and what does it hold. I think that we can actually predict some things about the future by generalizing, by doing the one thing that AI can't do, and that is abstracting and projecting out those things. So we can say, take something like the CD-ROM book, which came out in the 80s, had a number of advantages over a normal book. You could copy it, you had color. It was a very interesting technology. It didn't take off. Why didn't it take off? Well, you could scratch the disk. The screen was horrible to look at. It was a big computer. You're not going to lug that around. I'm going to read my book on the subway with my mind, right? So eventually, that actually is in the Kurzweil book. That's sort of a false pretender stage where that initial technology fails. What we can do, though, is look at all the flaws of a current technology and say, here is what the characteristics of a future technology that works well look like. So we can say, okay, it would need to have an excellent screen. It would need to be portable. It would need to hide away the medium of storage for us. It would need to have a long battery life. It would need to be hard to destroy. Now, I've basically just talked about what is a Kindle or an iPad. So you can predict the general characteristics. What you cannot predict are sort of black swan events. You can't predict somebody who invents something that just doesn't exist. And in one of my earlier sessions, I essentially said, you cannot explain to an 18th century farmer what a graphic designer is. And that's because a graphic designer is the end result of a series of steps. All of the technology that exists today is a series of steps built on other pieces of technology. Okay? So let's talk about some of the things that are going to happen. Society moves forward by automating things and abstracting things. So today we sort of fear some of these things, but it's not to be feared. When we created a hammer and a nail, that is a form of abstraction and automation. It allows us, instead of building mud huts, we can now hammer things together, hold them in a consistent fashion. Now I can build more complex structures. Without that, I cannot build multi-story structures until that original precursor technology exists. So what we have today are a bunch of precursors to future intelligence machines. But we do not understand how to do abstract reasoning. In fact, when we've tried some of these symbolic reasoning ideas, where we try to come up with all the rules, we go, well, we'll just put all the rules into a system. A bird is an animal that flies and has wings, except when it doesn't have any of those things and it's still a bird. And so what you end up with is this towering inferno of brittle rules that doesn't work. We also don't know how to ask the correct questions about certain things, right? We don't know how to actually get to a point where we can generalize. How do I look at something that cuts me, generalize that to something sharp, jagged, so the next time I see a rock that's jagged, I understand that that cuts me just like a knife would, right? So we're able to abstract and reason in a way that computers are not able to. So what I see is a lot of these narrow intelligences augmenting what we do. We're going to talk about some of the fantasy of the future. We're going to talk about some of the things actually that I think will actually happen, and I need some water. The Singularity is fantasy number one. It requires a huge leap in processing technology and understanding that we just don't have yet. I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it emerges out of nowhere, but I can't foresee it. That would be an absolute black swan event. The other thing is things like Terminators, or this sort of mass consciousness. This falls into the ugly side for me. I actually worry more about narrow intelligence controlled by dumb, ignorant, violent human beings than I worry about a machine rising up and deciding to kill us all. We don't need any help being jerks. Humans did not get to be the top species on the planet by being nice. And what we were really worried about when we worry about artificial intelligence is we worry about AI making ethical decisions. If you really look at where we fear it the most, we fear it in areas where it makes an ethical decision. So sentencing algorithms are another example of the ugly for me. These actually already are at work in many court systems in the United States, where, and people don't know this, it is a black box algorithm that spits out a number of whether somebody should get bail or go to jail or not. Most people don't know this. This is a terrifying, horrifying prospect in many respects. If you take a narrow intelligence today and you put it on, which is nothing really but a data gathering system, right? A box of statistics. DARPA calls neural nets spreadsheets on steroids. That's all that they are. If you have it go back and study the history of most legal systems, what you are going to find is the history of injustice. And the very same people that we have always put in jail, the poor and the disadvantaged, are the people who are going to continue to go to jail. They are going to ingest the horrific ethics that humans have. Now, I don't blame the machines for this, I blame the humans. We have to ask better questions. The future is not set in stone. It is also not binary. This is the other thing that we start to see in the popular press. It's either good or bad. There's nothing in between. And the fact is, life is in between. The beauty of life is in between. The gray area is where we all exist in life. So I actually see us not needing to create artificial general intelligence, which is fine, but actually creating semi-alien intelligence. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we are creating narrow AIs that it can assist us at the things that we do terribly. One example I gave earlier is politicians setting budgets. When politicians set budgets, they do a terrible job at it. They do a terrible job at it because they are trading favors with each other. And so what you have is a tremendous amount of waste and inefficiency of what should be a simple calculation. Where are my roads failing? If I have a sensor network of various systems, I can understand which roads are breaking down. If I'm using satellites to look down upon it, with artificial intelligence, I understand where the money could be allocated. I can probably do a better job with budgeting than politicians ever could. In addition, I see the AIs working with us. There was a great article out of MIT called Rise of the Centaurs. And the article title comes from a very interesting thing that most people don't know about. After Deep Blue, the chess-playing AI, beat Garry Kasparov, Gary wanted to play the system again. And IBM said, sorry, we're packing up our stuff and going home. We already beat you. So he sponsored a contest called Centaur Chess the next year, where anybody could enter a human, an artificial intelligence, or an artificial intelligence and human team. The team that won was a human and AI working together, which beat the pants off of an AI. And interestingly enough, it was not a grandmaster human. It was a couple of regular amateur chess players working with an artificial intelligence. So when you think about artificial intelligence as an augment to our lives, you can begin to see how we're not necessarily going to destroy all the jobs. I think this is another fallacy. We've already destroyed 95% of the jobs multiple times in history. Nobody here is a hunter-gatherer, I don't think, just mentally. Nobody here is still in most people. There's 3% of the people who are in agriculture. It's okay. Every time we destroy all the jobs, it's not that there's no downside to some of these things, short-term pain or disruption. Every time we destroy all the jobs, we create new and varied jobs. If you were a woman in the 1950s, you had a choice of 3 jobs: secretary, homemaker, teacher. Now women can do all kinds of things. We have more jobs than we have ever had in the future. Artificial intelligence is going to accelerate and create new types of jobs that we cannot imagine. Imagine, for instance, I have a call center, and if you've ever called a call center, it's a painful experience, right? You're calling up someone who's not generally paid to think critically, who generally lists all of the reasons they cannot help you in a very rote fashion. Every once in a while, you get someone on the phone who can think clearly, and it's so exciting to you. Think, my gosh, this person can actually do my return, and they understand what the problem is. Thank you so much. Can I please talk to your manager to say that you deserve, a raise? What if we could model some of the better decision-making processes of the best people on the team and create a system that allowed people to learn from those other people, right? So that the AI could nudge us along the way, level up the entire quality of the team, so that more of the people effectively are thinking critically because the machine is helping them to do it. When I think about things like medical technology, I gave an example earlier that's more advanced, but a simpler one is this. Imagine I wake up and I have a spot somewhere and I'm worried about this spot. What do I do now? Well, what I do now is I call the doctor and I say, I've got this spot I'm worried about, and the doctor says, that's great, I can see you in a month and a half, sorry. You go, no, but I'm really worried about this right now, and the doctor has no way to differentiate whether I actually have a spot that needs to be looked at right now, right, or something that can wait. However, in the future, I just point my smartphone at that spot, and it gives me an indicator that says, you better call the doctor. Could be malignant. There's a good chance. In the future, will be able to send that report to the doctor's office. The doctor will now be able to make better decisions about triage and scheduling. They'll say, okay, this is actually a priority. This person should come in. The other person who called me with hypochondria can wait at home, right? So we'll be able to make better decisions. In the future, I might have a watch that has a little hair-like pinprick that's constantly taking my blood. It's giving me a sense of triglycerides, cholesterol. Maybe I'm not working out as much. Maybe I'm deluding myself into thinking I'm working out as much, but I'm getting more of a punch, right? The AI could then begin to nudge you to eat more vegetables, do things. Now, we're humans, so we might avoid that. And so the AI might actually be able to predict that we're going to have a heart attack. But instead of having the heart attack and collapsing into my oatmeal, then hoping that the paramedics get there in time, the AI might say, by the way, the next day you're probably going to have a heart attack. You should probably call the automated ambulance, the self-driving ambulance, to come pick your ass up right now. Okay? So these types of things are going to be tremendously beneficial in terms of medical technology and our ability to get the types of care that we need, right, in the field. And it's only going to continue to progress. Also think about something like a smart home. When I have a fire alarm go off in the middle of the night, it's just this annoying screech. I have no idea whether it's true. Mostly it's just the battery's dead. If I have a smart home, it might say, hey, by the way, there is actually a fire. There's a voice telling me that there is a fire in this room, and I should probably avoid going out that way. And I should get the kids and the things that I care about and go out the back door as quickly as possible. Now think about something like the Google Assistant that they just demonstrated. Instead of making hair appointments, now the house is actually calling the fire department. And it has contextual awareness of the situation. Where the house is burning. What type of fire it is. Is it a grease fire? Was there an explosion of some kind? Did somebody fall asleep with a cigarette? It will have contextual information, which theoretically could then be given to the first responders or the fire department. And now they arrive on the scene with additional understanding and information that they didn't have before. They're not walking into a fire blind, right? So these are the types of benefits that we're going to see with artificial intelligence. Some of this is going to take time for the infrastructure to roll out. A lot of the stuff that we're seeing here is still very much in the research stage. I would say in some respects don't necessarily believe the short-term hype, do believe the long-term vision. We don't really understand all the things we can do with artificial intelligence, but we're going up a sigmoid curve, and at some point we hit a point of diminishing returns where it doesn't live up to our expectations, right? And potentially we have another winter. I think it would be smaller at this point in time, but eventually we're going to run up against what neural nets in our current understanding can do. I've already run up against it. I tried to create something to name one of my novels, and I fed it all the coolest novel titles in history, and it gave me a bunch of gibberish, right? And you know, some people get very excited about if I fed it a bunch of novels, it could generate a novel. It's not generating a novel anytime soon. My job's not in any trouble anytime soon. What it is generating is the format of a screenplay or the format of a novel, but it's not saying anything. It has no contextual understanding. And other types of things that are going to be exciting, when you think about sort of self-driving cars, right now the popular press is all about every time there's a crash, right? It's like they're excited about the crash. It's disgusting, right? That's what they're reporting on. And they're reporting on it in a misleading way. Every article title now is Tesla with autopilot crashes. That's like saying man with legs runs. They're not accurately reporting that the Tesla had its autopilot on. What they are doing is deliberately misleading you to create fear. Here's some real fear. You have a better chance of dying in a car wreck tomorrow than just about anything else in your life. 1.25 million people die of car wrecks every year. The AIs are going to be much better at that, much better at survivability over the long term. When in the future, then they ask people what it was like in the past when you tell them that you drove a car They'll look at you like, what are you talking about? It'll only be a specialized thing for like a sports car or something that you own because you really wanted to drive. And they'll be shocked that that many people died and that that was acceptable to society. At the same time, there are many things that self-driving cars cannot do at this point. Jan LeCun just came out with a self-driving car company. He said it can't understand hand signals of road workers. And there's no way to teach it to do that yet. This is one of the best AI minds working today, and he has no solution to this problem. So they're using a limited pilot set in a small town where the workers are aware that it is happening because they are going to have to communicate with the cars in a different way. And as a society, I think we will find mitigations for some of these things over time. In addition, we're going to have to find how to give a higher level of meaning to the artificial intelligence. When an AI crashes today, any obstruction is exactly the same to the AI. A piece of plastic debris, a person, or a divider. But a human knows that that plastic thing, if I hit it, it's probably not good. But if I hit a human, there are serious consequences. If I hit that wall there, I am going to die, right? So we are going to have to get better at teaching computers to understand meaning, have abstract reasoning. All of this will happen much slower than people imagine, right? When you think about how long things to develop, people always overestimate the speed of these things. Society is speeding up. Things are changing. They are not changing so fast that we are going to be living in a godlike AI network where we're all virtualized in the next 10 years. It's not happening. Now, if it does happen, I'll happily be there with all of you guys living in this virtual paradise, but it ain't going to happen. I'll bet my career on this one. So we don't have to worry about that. We also don't have to worry about it destroying every single job that exists. We've already, again, destroyed all the jobs in many instances in the past. And we progress as a society by abstracting and automating certain types of jobs. People become very attached to doing certain types of jobs, almost in a perverse Sisyphean way, that are not necessary. When I was a systems administrator, I took a perverse pleasure in how long I could stand there and take the pain of standing at a keyboard in a cold data center for 14 hours drinking Red Bull. It's insane. All because I took perverse pride in doing these repetitive tasks, when my energy and my intelligence could have been spent better elsewhere if much of that has been automated. And we're already seeing that in the tech industry, right? Where you're seeing DevOps and these sort of immutable systems being developed, and that allows people to move higher up the value chain. That is the history of mankind. When everybody doesn't have to be a farmer, somebody can be a lawyer, somebody can be an engineer, somebody can be a venture capitalist, right? And that is what specialization brings. We're going to see an increasing acceleration of that type of specialization, and it is not a bad thing. It is not a thing to fear. It is a thing to embrace, and it is going to make our lives better. There are definitely things that are not good. We cannot control all of the things that an AI will do. We will not stop governments from creating killing machines. It will not happen. It doesn't matter if we create a treaty where every single country on Earth signs up to it. I guarantee you, I will bet anyone here $1 million that they will build it anyway with black budgets, and they will do it secretly anyway. It doesn't matter. So there are certain things that we can't stop that are bad, but there are so many things that are positive that, to me, the future looks very, very bright. I don't worry about these kinds of doomsday scenarios. Humans love to come up with horrifying doomsday scenarios. They almost never work out that way. We are wired to see big, flashy threats, not important threats that play out over a short period of time or a longer period of time. We will be fine. Humans are very creative and intuitive. We will invent new jobs, and the economy will move faster and faster, and life is going to be very exciting over the next 10 to 20 years. Thank you, everybody.